Welcome to another exciting episode of Growth Leaders by Shot. Today, we're rolling out the red carpet for a guest who is redefining what it means to lead in a global landscape. Get ready to meet Wanda Shoer, a powerhouse leader whose expertise spans continents, cultures, and industries. From steering cross-cultural teams across Paris, New Jersey, and Asia to driving cutting-edge learning transformations. Wanda is a master at turning complexity into success. But that's just the beginning. Wanda's not only a global business leader, she's a strategist, a mentor, and a dynamic working mom who's perfectly balances between career growth and personal fulfillment. Buckle up for a conversation beaming with wisdom, energy, and a few surprises along the way. Wanda, it's a real honor to have you with us.
I'm excited to be here with you, Peter, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm like, is that really me? Thank you.
Yes, that's you, Wanda. So I'm going to jump into one of my favorite subjects directly, and that is let's talk culture. When you look at this big question, culture, what is important for you when you look at it?
I think thinking of your question, the most important thing for me when I think about the different cultures is understanding what individual perspectives are. So really trying to learn and understand what is important to the individual, irrespective of what country they live in or culture that they identify with. Because I think from a culture perspective, I mean, we all grow up in different parts of the world. We experience different cultures based on what our early, experiences are in childhood and in early professional career. So I think that when a person comes in, it's way more than just the culture where they're currently living. It's really, who they are, what experiences they've had in the past. And for me, the most important thing is to kind of come into any new meeting, new conversation with that in mind, that people have very different perspectives and that there is not one unique way of doing things.
Have you looked into the different kind of decision processes? I sometimes, because I've had the fortune to run Swedish companies internationally, globally. And in some countries, I said, I'm happy to be the chairman and not the other way around. Have you looked into the decision process if you take US and compare it to Europe or Asia? How it differs?
I have actually done, I mean, when I think about decision-making processes, I'm thinking about what is the information that is needed for that particular individual or team or group that I'm working with to be able to make the best decision possible. So I'm not looking at it from a perspective of this particular culture makes a decision this way or this particular group makes a decision another way. I'm looking at it as, what is the information that is needed so that we can make sure that the right decision is being made. So I'm not, and then maybe that makes me a little bit different, but I'm not thinking about it from, one perspective. I'm thinking of it from what is going to enable the group, individual, or team to make the best decision on behalf of whatever they're working for, and I guess that's the way that I I think about it.
And that is great. But when you look at your role, I mean, you are today, a pharma company, Sanofi. I mean, there's some 90,000 employees. You come from another pharma company with plus 100,000 employees. And I presume that leadership is an important question for you. There may be other topics which you see are important driving in the organizations today. But let's start. Leadership, I would presume, so that you need to confirm. But are there other important areas? I mean, it could be in the compliance area, etc., etc.
Oh, yes.
Where you see from your role as a chief in the L&D side.
Yes, yeah, definitely. There's so many different areas. So leadership is a component of it, and it is important, right? So we need to
Yeah.
make sure that as we are growing people in the organization, that they have the right skills to be the leaders of the future. So, so from a leadership perspective, it's important to focus on leadership development at all levels. But I think that there's, working in the pharma industry, and before I moved into pharma industry, I worked in the financial service industry. You also need to understand how to do your job. So, there are, protocols, and there's some different sort of, standard operating procedures that have to be understood, and in order for you to actually perform your job. So there's a heavy emphasis on making sure that we're providing the right tools for that. You need to do to support your ability to make decisions, or the ability for teams to make decisions. Those are all things that are in some cases part of leadership training, but they're also part of how do you actually operate in a corporate environment. And it doesn't matter what the industry. These are sort of things that are true to just being in large corporations.
So those we normally categorize some of those as personal development side.
Yes.
And then you have, but they go so much hand in hand with the leadership and personal development in the growth. So transforming an organization into now 2025, 2030 in the leadership side, what in your mind, what is important? How do you secure getting up the new generation coming off? How do you secure maybe carrying on the experience? I mean, what is in your mind? What is important?
I think what's important as we move into more of this, AI world, is to really focus on the things that make us human. And so, it's important to really develop empathy, and to be able to lead in an empathetic way. I think that's really important to me. It's important to be curious, to have a mindset of openness, and to be able to lead in a way that is inclusive of other perspectives. And to me, that comes really close with curiosity. Being inclusive also means that you're curious about how others work, and you want to make sure that they're part of the conversation as well, for me. And I think adaptability is also really important, because things are changing so rapidly, whether it's technology or business operating models that are changing. Things are changing rapidly. So we need to be able to adapt quickly to new ways of working, new technology, new things that come through. So those, I think, are the three most important things. And for me, I mean, I think there's probably a bunch of others, but curiosity, empathy, and adaptability are key things in leadership that we need to make sure.
And I really think it's letting the organization grow with it. Let them learn and pick up the best ideas which are coming up, because there's always people who say, well, this is really finding the good bits and pieces and being able to pick it up. I think what you're into, adaptability, empathy, which are highly human and should maybe be there from when you grow up as a child. Sometimes not, depending on, and sometimes bits and pieces. So how can you support the development in an organization? Is it a way of working? Because it cannot only be training. I guess it's also it's more than that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I don't think everything is solved with training. I think and I do think that some people are, more natural at some of these types of skills. But what is important is to be self-aware, to understand sort of where do you land, how important is it for you, and what can ability to be a leader, and if that is, okay, I need to, take it up a little bit on the empathy, or I need to take it down a little bit on the empathy, but just having that self-awareness, I think is really important. and being really secure in who you are as a person and as a leader. I think understanding yourself, grounding in who you are, and being, creating that center for yourself, it really helps with all of these other things. So I think that understanding of yourself is so important in any leadership journey.
So let's take a jump then into women and leadership by women. What is the percentage of women leader in total? Because when I've been looking at that, I mean, Sweden, we are a fairly equal country. And if you are in tech business, etc., I mean, it's a 50-50. But if we look at the manufacturing side, then it's still 20-25% women in leadership and 75% men. How is it in the pharma? And maybe those are, I guess they are open figures which are in the annual reports.
That's a great question. I'll answer it. I don't have the exact numbers and things like that, but I'll answer it from a very personal perspective. I think that there's room for improvement. There's room at different layers in the organization. So there may be, and I'm not speaking of a specific organization, just in general. There may be sort of more of a balance at lower levels, and then as you rise in the organization, you see representation diminish. Both for women and in the U.S., I think especially for people of color or different community groups. I think that you see less and less representation as you go up in the organization. That's personal, more of my personal perspective. I don't have the numbers on that. I haven't done the research, but I think it is important that we continue to work on that and that we continue to emphasize the importance of having different perspectives at senior level positions, and that we open the door for people who don't typically, have those opportunities, so that there's actually access, learning, opportunities to understand and grow, as well as sponsorship and mentorship as you're growing your career, so that you can, that you can proceed in those roles. And I think what's really, once we start to sort of shift that representation at the top, then it will becomes easier for people at the lower levels to see themselves in those positions and to believe that it is possible to grow their careers if it is what they want,
Yeah, and I see it when I have the fortune to interview people. There are a lot of programs coming into and actually also running. But what is your experience? I mean, you're a mom for 2 kids and have a family and so on, and doing a career at the same time. But what is important in your view to be able to both, being a great mom, having a family, and doing the career? How do you balance those things, and what are your principles in the thinking here?
I think the first principle is communication, open communication with my family. And when I was younger and starting my career, I always knew that I wanted to have a career. So being very vocal and open about that. And as I was going into becoming a mom, and knowing that it was important to me, I think is part of how I've been able to balance it. So it's important for me to have my family. I wanted to have children. I love being a mother. It's also important to me to have a career and to feel that I am part of this working community, and I love working and I love my job. And in my family, we're very open about the things that I want to do for my career. And we sit and we talk about it. I do travel a lot for my job. So we talk about sort of what are the travels that I'm going to do, and do they make sense in my family? My children are part of the conversation. And there's always a lot of excitement with my work. So I think that there's no real balance. It's really integrated into my life, and it is a part of my life. And they know what I do, and they know what I'm working on, and they know what's important to me. and they get excited about it because I'm bringing that kind of energy into it as well. And I think what's also really important is to have a partnership that provides you with that kind of support and encouragement as well, which I also have at home, and to have a village of people that support you, whether it's emotionally or literally babysitting, but that you have a village of people that you can tap into when you need support. I think, and I feel very lucky. I think that it's not always that people have that. So I recognize how lucky I am to be able to have those types of people in my life. But it's never been a question on whether I have to give anything up to do the career that I want or to be the mother that I want to be. There's just sort of give and takes, and we talk them through, and we decide what makes sense for our family.
I think that's great. But especially say the communication here, and I guess it's fairly early also in the relationship and when you form your family and so on. That's so important. And at least we see it here many times. The old roles of a family, they are changing. There are different interests. We see more and more dads being more and more home and taking on responsibility which we're not on for 20 years ago, and so on. So
yeah, I have to say that I've always been very much about having sort of equal roles in the household, and way before I had kids was having this conversation about, when I become a mother, I want to make sure that I have a partner that's going to be able to do all the things that I do, and that was always a part of the conversation. It's never, and I don't know. I mean, I guess other people don't have those conversations, but for me, it was really important. So that's always been a part of the conversation.
So who is the chef in the kitchen?
Pretty much my husband. So yeah, I do very little cooking. I do cook, and I do actually enjoy cooking. And I'm not so bad at it, but I don't have, I usually work a lot more, I have always had global roles. So, so he sort of takes that on. But I always say to people, it's not that I don't like to cook. I actually love cooking. I bake. I love baking as well. But
it's just a fun thing to see. It differs.
So, yeah.
In our family, I do all the meat stuff and so on, and then so it's always so. Have you had any failures if you look back? And I'm not talking about a failure like that, but have you in your leadership roles in L&D, learning and development, or in others, which has actually brought you forward? When you think back, that's really when I learned how to do things in a different way than I did before.
I've had a lot of those.
Could you share one or two of them? I would love to hear.
I think I'll share. I mean, some of them are, the way that I would answer the question is it's a personal journey for everyone. When you go through an experience and you understand that there's an opportunity for you to learn something or for you to do something in a different way, there's a lot of, like for me, it's really that personal reflection on, okay, I could have done this differently. And I have gone through that kind of experience a lot of times where, I've, been on a project and, things didn't go exactly how I expected. And it's that moment of reflection and going back. I'm like, well, what to have gotten to this outcome faster or, smoother, because I think I'm a very driven person. So if I commit to doing something, it's more than likely always going to get done. That's just, I am that kind of person. But how I get to that, has been different, and as I've grown my career, it's become, better and smoother, and and that's the learning journey that we all have as leaders. So I'm not going to describe a specific example because I think there've been too many, but it's more of taking that time to see, okay, I learned that I need to, communicate better, or I learned that I have to spend more time managing my stakeholders, or I learned that maybe I need to step back and not manage to the level of detail that I was managing. So it's sort of, those are the key things, that you have to be in it to learn it. And as a leader, you should always be reflecting on, what role you played in whatever positive or potentially negative outcome that there was on a project. So you always play a role, and you have to be willing to accept the fact that when things go right, it's always great to take responsibility for the things that are going well, but you also have to take the responsibility for the things that are not going well, and take the opportunity to learn from them, and take the opportunity to be vulnerable and let people see what you're learning along the way. And I think that's fine. And you could be a big leader, with lots of big teams, and if you don't do that, you're losing the opportunity to really connect with people, because everyone is.
Yeah, and as you say, your own self-reflection is very important, but also then when you're growing as a leader, be actually open to feedback and reflect upon the feedback. Why is it coming, positive or for improvement?
Exactly.
Now, rapid fire questions.
Okay, good.
Are you ready? What's the
I'm ready.
best leadership advice you have ever received?
Yeah, the best leadership advice I've ever received, I've received a lot of really good leadership advice. One is you don't need to rush, and
That's a good thing.
yes, it's a good thing. You can slow down.
We don't have to go deeper with that, because there's so much more to that. Don't rush, because it will come anyhow. And there's maturity in that answer. Great. One leadership myth you wish to debunk.
That you have to be extroverted to be a leader.
Okay, so introverted guys and girls can be great leaders also. And I understand what you mean with that. There are a lot of people who are great leaders, not being extroverted also.
Yes.
Great. Your go-to productivity hack?
For me, it's always music. I have music on all the time. Whenever I'm not in a meeting, if I'm working on something, I have music on. Yes.
Is there a personal mantra or philosophy?
I don't know if I'm quoting it correctly. I actually have it written down on my board. Let me take a look at it. It says, "Every morning we are born again. So what we do today is what matters most."
Yeah, that's living
And
now.
it's Buddha.
It's not living by a plan, but it's living now. Good.
Yes.
Favorite book or podcast right now?
So right now I am reading a lot of different things. So my favorite podcast is the Simon Sinek. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but that's my favorite. I love his style, his energy, and he has a lot of really great discussions with people. And my all-time favorite book is a novel. It is by José Saramago. He's a Portuguese author, and it's called Blindness. And it's sort of just a really interesting book about what happens. I'm simplifying it, but it's what happens when you are in the in crowd and what happens when you're in the out crowd. It is, if you haven't read it, it's a great book.
And it's available in English too.
Yes, it's available in English. You could read it in Spanish and Portuguese. This is available. He's a Nobel Prize winning author. So it's available in a lot of different languages. I am absolutely simplifying the concept of the book, but for me, it was really around that struggle when you're in the in crowd versus the out crowd, and then how do people sort of behave in those types of scenarios. And it's a really interesting book. There is a movie, but the movie does not do the book justice at all. So,
Okay, we will make sure we provide that to our listeners today. And the final, if you could sum up your life's purpose in one sentence, what would that be?
my purpose is to help people find their purpose. So, yeah.
Great. Lovely having you, Wanda, on the Growth Leaders podcast. And thank you so much for today. Wish you the best moving forward.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.